This is my true story. I worked 50 years of my life building a home, raising my daughter, and believing she'd take care of me when I couldn't walk as fast or lift as much. I gave her everything: my savings, my name, my trust. I thought I'd grow old in peace, surrounded by love. But one night, I heard her laugh and say, "Dad's useless now." Those words broke something inside me. You won't believe what I did next morning. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I was never a rich man when I started. I worked my whole life fixing roads, laying concrete, and saving every dollar I could. When my daughter was born, I promised myself she'd never struggle the way I did. Every weekend I worked overtime just so she could have a better school, new clothes, and a warm home. I skipped vacations. I skipped meals sometimes. I wanted her to live easy, not hard. When her mother died, she was only 15. I didn't cry in front of her. I had to be strong, even when I was breaking inside. I made her breakfast every morning, drove her to school, sat outside in my truck when she had dance recitals because I didn't want her to see me crying. I told myself every sacrifice was worth it if she grew up safe and happy. When she got older, I paid for college with the savings I'd built from 30 years of labor. I never bought myself a new car, but I bought her one for graduation. When she got married, I gave her and her husband my blessing, even when I wasn't sure he deserved it. I gave them money for the wedding, helped them buy their first house, and even signed over part of my own property so they'd have a place to start their life. I wanted them to have everything. I told myself, family comes first. When I retired, my daughter said I should move in with them so they could look after me. I thought that was love. I thought I'd finally done something right, raised a daughter who cared. I sold my small construction business, closed my accounts, and moved into the home I once built. The same home where she grew up laughing, running around barefoot, calling me her hero. Now it was her house, her rules, her family. I tried to stay out of the way. I sat in the living room most days, just watching the world move without me. I'd cook breakfast, sweep the porch, mow the lawn, little things to show I could still help. But slowly, they stopped asking me for anything. She started talking less. Her husband barely looked me in the eye. At first, I told myself they were just busy. Work, life, kids, that's what happens. But soon, it wasn't just distance, it was indifference. I'd sit at the table, and they'd talk like I wasn't there. I'd clean the kitchen, and they'd tell the kids to thank their mother for it. I became invisible in my own home. Still, I stayed patient. I thought maybe I was being sensitive, maybe I was expecting too much. But it got worse. They started locking the office where my documents were kept. My mail stopped showing up in the mailbox. I noticed her husband talking about selling property, my property, like it was his. I stayed silent. I didn't want to start a fight. I thought love would fix it. Every night, I'd sit on the porch, looking at the house lights and telling myself it was all just a phase. I remembered the nights I stayed up when she was sick, the mornings I carried her to the car so she wouldn't be late to school. All those memories played in my head like a movie. I had given her everything I had, not just in money, but in years, the kind you can't get back. I kept telling myself it was worth it. That love always comes back around. But love doesn't always come back. Sometimes it dies quietly, replaced by greed and convenience. I didn't see it fully yet, but I could feel it, the shift in her eyes when she looked at me. Like I was no longer her father, just another old man taking up space. Then one night, I heard the words that proved what I already knew deep down. Words that made my chest go cold and my hands shake. Words that turned everything I'd built, everything I'd believed, into dust. It was late in the evening, sometime past 9. I was sitting in my chair by the hallway, half asleep, listening to the sound of their voices from the kitchen. I wasn't trying to overhear. I just couldn't sleep anymore these days. My legs hurt, my back ached. But what I heard that night hurt worse than any pain my body ever knew. My daughter was talking to her husband, laughing about something. Then she said it. "Dad's useless now." Just like that, a joke to her. A sentence that erased a lifetime of work, sweat, and love in one breath. She said it like I wasn't even there, like the man who raised her had already stopped existing. I didn't move. I didn't cough. I didn't let them know I was listening. I just sat there, staring at the floor. My chest felt heavy. My hands went numb. I tried to tell myself I misheard, but I didn't. She said it clearly, with a small laugh. I could hear her husband chuckling too. That sound, their laughter, is something I'll never forget. It was the moment I realized I had become nothing more than a burden in their eyes. Not a father, not a man, just a bill to be paid, a space to be cleared, a problem to be solved. I stayed in that chair for a long time after they stopped talking. The TV was still playing in the background, but I didn't hear it. My head was full of memories, her first steps, her first day of school, the time she fell off her bike, and I ran down the driveway to pick her up before she even cried. The day she graduated, smiling with her arms around me. I could still feel that moment like it was yesterday, the way she said, "I'll take care of you one day, Dad." I guess one day came and went. When I finally stood up, my legs were shaking, but it wasn't from age. It was from anger, from shame, from a kind of heartbreak you don't recover from. I walked back to my room and closed the door quietly. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall, listening to them laugh in the living room. I thought about everything I'd done to keep her safe. Every extra job, every sleepless night, every dream I gave up so she could chase hers. And for what? So she could laugh about how useless I'd become. The word useless kept echoing in my mind. It wasn't just what she said. It was what she meant. That I had served my purpose. That my time was done. That I had no more value left. She thought because I was old, I was powerless. She thought because I was quiet, I was weak. She forgot who built the very floor she walked on, who paid every bill that gave her this life. She forgot that the same hands she now ignored once carried her through everything. But I didn't forget. I didn't shout. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. That one word told me everything I needed to know. That night, something changed inside me. I stopped being a father hoping for respect. I started being a man planning for freedom. By sunrise, I had already made my decision. I would not beg for love from people who only counted what I was worth in dollars. If all they saw in me was what I had, then that's exactly what I'd take with me. Every cent, every piece of paper that tied my name to theirs. I didn't know where I'd go yet. I just knew it wouldn't be here. That laugh was the last sound I ever heard in that house. I woke up the next morning and sat at the same table where my daughter used to eat breakfast before school. The same table where we once talked about her future, her dreams, her plans. Now, it was quiet. I could still hear the echo of her voice from the night before. Dad's useless now. Those words didn't fade. They stayed sharp. They cut through the silence like a knife. I looked around the house, the walls, the photos, the furniture. Everything I had worked for was still there, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like I was living in someone else's life. A life I built, but didn't belong to. She came downstairs that morning, smiling like nothing happened. I watched her pour coffee, talk to her husband, check her phone. They acted normal. Maybe they thought I didn't hear. Maybe they didn't care. Either way, I understood the truth. I was no longer part of their world. I wasn't family anymore. I was just furniture in the background. I had spent decades teaching her values, discipline, and kindness. I thought she learned, but she learned something else instead. Comfort. Comfort makes people forget who helped them get there. I sat still, didn't say a word. I wasn't angry. I was empty. There's a difference. Anger burns fast, but emptiness stays quiet. It spreads slowly until you don't even recognize yourself anymore. I realized that morning that I'd been holding on to an illusion. That love from family automatically means loyalty. It doesn't. Love without respect turns into pity, and pity is worse than hate. At least hate feels honest. Pity just looks down on you while pretending to care. I went to my room after breakfast. The smell of dust and old wood filled the air. My room was the smallest in the house now. They'd turned the bigger rooms into guest spaces and storage. My name wasn't even on the mailbox anymore. Everything that was once mine was slowly being erased. But I didn't argue. I let them think they'd won. I let them believe I was weak. I wanted them comfortable in their ignorance. Because when people think you're finished, they stop paying attention. And that's when you start planning. That day, I opened my drawers. Inside were documents, files, and old folders that most people would ignore. But I never threw anything away. Every deed, every title, every receipt, all in my name. The house, the land, the savings. Nothing they owned existed without my signature. I sat there for hours, looking through it all. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about fairness. I gave them everything they asked for. All I wanted in return was respect. They couldn't give even that. That night, I stayed awake again. The house was quiet except for the sound of the heater. I looked out the window at the driveway I had poured myself 30 years ago. I remembered holding my daughter's hand while she learned to ride her bike there. I remembered her laughter back then. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that made life worth it. I wanted to remember that version of her, not the one who saw me as useless. But I couldn't. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who thought money meant power. I realized I couldn't save what was already lost. The love I gave had no place to land anymore. It was time to stop waiting for her to care. It was time to stop sitting quietly, hoping she'd change. That night, I decided to disappear. Not to punish her, but to save myself. If I stayed, I'd rot in that chair like she expected me to. But if I left, I'd remind her what happens when you underestimate the man who built your world. The house was dark when I made my decision. The world outside was asleep. But for the first time in years, I was fully awake. I waited until everyone was asleep before I moved. The clock in the hallway read 2:17 a.m. The house was silent, but my heart was pounding steady, not from fear, but from clarity. I walked slowly through the rooms, turning lights on one by one. I wanted to see everything clearly for the last time. The framed pictures on the wall, the furniture, the dishes in the kitchen, all of it bought with my hands, my money, my years. Every corner of that house was a piece of me, and I realized how easy I had made it for them to forget. They had comfort because I gave it freely. They never earned any of it. That was my biggest mistake. I went into my room and pulled open the old wooden drawer where I kept my important papers. The stack was still there. Property deeds, insurance documents, tax receipts, and the final mortgage statement that said, "Paid in full." Every line had my name on it. I sat down and looked through them one more time. My daughter thought she owned the place because she lived in it. She didn't. Everything was still legally under my control. I smiled quietly. For the first time in months, I felt steady again. Not powerful, not angry, just in control of something that was always mine. I opened my closet and took out the metal cash box I kept hidden behind old jackets. Inside was every financial record I had kept for 40 years. Business contacts, banking details, and names of people who owed me favors. Most of them still alive, still working in the same industries where I'd helped them get their start. I knew all the right numbers to call. People forget old men who retire, but old men don't forget. At sunrise, I made coffee like usual. My daughter came downstairs, half awake, scrolling her phone. I looked at her once and saw nothing familiar. The same child who used to run into my arms now couldn't even look up from a screen. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to explain myself. I didn't owe her that. She'd already said what she thought of me. Useless. That word was enough. So I went back to my room, packed a few clothes, and locked the drawer with the documents inside. Then I made a phone call that would change everything. By noon, my lawyer, an old friend named Harold, picked up exactly where we left off years ago. I told him to begin the process. Transfer ownership, close all linked accounts, freeze every asset connected to my name until I gave further instructions. He didn't ask questions. He'd seen enough families destroy themselves over greed. By afternoon it was done. The house, the land, the savings, the retirement funds, all under my control again. While everyone in that house laughed and watched TV, I was signing papers that turned their comfort into thin air. It wasn't revenge, it was correction. For too long, They'd built their lives on the assumption that I'd always be there to fund it. They forgot what happens when the foundation walks away. That night, I slept better than I had in years. My decision was final. I would leave before sunrise. No warnings, no arguments, no explanations. Just silence. I wanted them to wake up and realize the cost of disrespect. I wanted that house, my house, to feel as empty to them as they had made me feel. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I lay there thinking about every job I had worked, every storm I had endured, every dollar I had earned. All of it had led to this single decision, to take back my life before they buried it. By dawn, I was ready. I woke up before the sun rose. The house was still quiet, the kind of silence that tells you everyone is too comfortable to care. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, thinking about the night before. I didn't feel sad anymore. The anger was gone too. What I felt now was focus. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for kindness or explain why I deserved respect. I had done enough explaining in my life. I was going to disappear, and I was going to do it in a way they'd never see coming. My plan was simple. I'd take everything I built, everything that had my name on it, and walk away clean. I wasn't going to leave a single thing they could use. No assets, no access, no safety net. If they wanted a world without me, they were about to get one. Without my money, too. I grabbed my small notebook, the one where I had written down every detail of my accounts, investments, and property codes. Every number was still accurate. I had checked them hundreds of times. People think old men forget, but I never forget the things that matter. At 6 a.m., I left the house quietly. The air outside was cold and still. I walked down the road to the corner cafe where I used to go years ago before retirement. The same place where I met the banker who helped me buy my first property. He was long gone now, but his son still ran the local branch. I ordered a coffee, sat in the corner booth, and waited until the bank opened at 9. I had 3 hours to plan the rest of my steps. I wrote everything down on a napkin. What to sell first, where to transfer funds, which contacts to call, which documents to keep. I didn't want anyone tracing my moves, so I'd go through my lawyer for all official actions and cash out the rest myself. I wasn't running away. I was closing a chapter the right way. I had worked too long to let ungrateful people live off my effort. When the bank opened, I walked in with steady hands. The young teller didn't recognize me, but the manager did. He had seen me for years coming in with deposits and loan payments. I told him I wanted to liquidate everything, all investments, accounts, and shares tied to my name. He blinked, asked me if I was sure. I nodded once. He processed it without a word. Paper after paper slid across the counter. Signatures, seals, and approvals. I watched my entire life's work turn into clean, silent numbers on a printed sheet. When the final amount appeared, I stared at it for a long second. $3.6 million. It didn't make me proud. It didn't make me happy. It just reminded me how long I'd spent working for people who never said thank you. That money represented 40 years of labor, 40 years of being dependable, and in one night, it became freedom. By afternoon, I had arranged for everything to be transferred into accounts only I could access. My lawyer confirmed the transfers and reminded me the house was now officially off the market, in my name only. My daughter and her husband wouldn't be able to touch a single thing. Not even the electricity bill was under their control anymore. I walked out of that bank and felt lighter. For the first time in decades, I wasn't tied to anyone. I didn't need to call, explain, or apologize. Every debt was settled, every tie was cut. The world that used to revolve around their comfort was now under my silence. That night, I didn't return home. I stayed at a small motel near the edge of town. I didn't pack much, just enough to travel far. While they slept soundly in a house that no longer belonged to them, I lay in that motel bed watching the clock. Every second that passed brought me closer to the life I should have lived years ago. One where nobody laughed at the man who built everything. Tomorrow, I'd be gone for good. The next morning came fast. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't need to. My mind was clear, sharper than it had been in years. I got dressed in clean clothes, shaved, and looked in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't weak anymore. He looked tired, yes, but not defeated. He looked ready. I checked the small folder beside my bed. Inside were the signed documents from my lawyer, confirmation of every transfer, and receipts from the bank. Everything I owned was now in my control. My daughter and her husband had nothing left tied to my name. They just didn't know it yet. I left the motel just after sunrise and drove to my lawyer's office one last time. He was waiting for me with a fresh set of documents. He asked where I was heading, and I told him not to worry. He smiled and said, "It's all done." Those words felt final, like closing a door that had been open too long. I signed 3 more forms, the last ones required to complete the liquidation of my assets. By the time I walked out, every property, stock, and account was cleared. The total sum was $3.6 million. Clean, legal, and untraceable to anyone but me. The cash portion was ready for pickup at the private branch downtown. I drove there slowly, watching the streets I'd lived on for decades. Every corner had a memory. Every building had a story. I realized this town had taken more from me than it had ever given back. By the time I reached the bank, I didn't feel attached anymore. The security guard opened the door for me, and the manager escorted me to a private office. 2 armored cases sat on the table. My entire life's work fit neatly inside them. I signed for the withdrawal, loaded the cases into the trunk of my car, and stood there for a while in the parking lot. People came and went, busy with their errands, unaware that an old man standing a few feet away had just erased everything that tied him to his family. I didn't feel revenge. I felt release. All those years of quiet humiliation, of waiting to be respected, of being ignored in my own home. They were gone now. Money couldn't fix that pain, but it could free me from ever feeling it again. By noon, I was at the courthouse finalizing the sale of the house. My daughter thought it was hers. She had no idea I had listed it months ago under my name. The buyers had already wired the payment. The papers were signed, stamped, and done. The house she laughed in, the house she called hers, wasn't hers anymore. It now belonged to strangers who would never know the story behind its walls. I drove past it one last time. The front porch still had the old swing I built for her when she was 7. The same swing where she once told me I was her hero. I didn't stop. I didn't look twice. That version of her, the one who loved me, was gone a long time ago. I wasn't saying goodbye to her. I was saying goodbye to the version of myself that kept believing she'd come back. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into the airport. I bought a one-way ticket out of the country. No return, no forwarding address, no explanation. I didn't leave a note behind. There was nothing left to say. People who mock you for your weakness don't deserve to know how strong you really are. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window. The town got smaller until it disappeared completely. I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I was free. Everything I had built was now mine again. And soon, they would wake up to nothing. By the time they realized what happened, I'd already be gone. A name on a deed they could no longer touch, a number on an account they could never find, and a father they'd never laugh at again. The morning after I left, the house woke up without me. I wasn't there to make coffee, to fix the heater, or to bring in the mail. For the first time, the silence in that house had weight. My daughter came downstairs expecting breakfast already made like always. Instead, she found an empty table and my chair pushed neatly against it. She probably thought I had gone for a walk. She had no idea I was already gone for good. When she opened the fridge, she noticed the groceries were almost gone too. No new supplies, no deliveries. She reached for her phone to check the account, and that's when it started. Her card declined. Once, twice, 3 times. Then her husband tried his. Same result. The confusion started to spread fast. I could picture it perfectly. The panic in their voices, the way they'd start checking statements, calling the bank, refreshing screens that no longer showed a single dollar in their names. Every account, every line, every link they depended on had been severed. The money they thought they controlled didn't exist anymore, at least not for them. The house they claimed ownership over was already sold and transferred, the utilities, the mortgage, the taxes, all frozen under my name. In a few weeks, the new owners would arrive, and they'd have to leave. Everything they built on disrespect was collapsing in real time. By mid-morning, I knew they'd start calling me. My phone would ring again and again. Maybe at first they'd sound worried, then angry, then desperate. I didn't answer any of it. The number they dialed was already disconnected. My phone lay at the bottom of a trash bin in the motel room I'd left behind. There was nothing for them to reach anymore. For years, they'd ignored my voice when I spoke softly. Now they'd finally hear silence when they screamed. The neighbors probably watched them pacing around outside, confused, checking the mailbox, arguing with each other. They'd ask each other what happened to me. Maybe someone said they saw me drive off early that morning. Maybe someone said I looked calm. Either way, nobody knew where I went, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I didn't want to be found. I wanted the distance. I wanted them to feel what it's like when something you depend on suddenly disappears. That's what they did to me, just slower. They took my trust piece by piece until nothing was left. Now it was their turn. By the afternoon, they'd realized the house keys didn't fit the locks anymore. The locks had already been changed by the new owners. The backyard gate, the garage, the office, all locked tight. They'd stand there surrounded by boxes, bills, and confusion, trying to understand how everything could vanish overnight. They'd call the lawyer, the bank, maybe even the police. But every record, every transaction, every move was legal and clean. It was my name, my property, my money. They couldn't accuse me of theft. You can't steal what's yours. I imagined my daughter's face when it finally hit her, that the man she called useless had just pulled the ground out from under her feet. Maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd curse me. Maybe she'd finally remember who built that house, who paid for her degree, who gave her everything she took for granted. I didn't hate her. I just didn't care anymore. The house that once echoed with laughter now echoed with panic. She'd walk through the halls I built, calling my name, but I wouldn't answer. The sound of her footsteps wouldn't reach me anymore. I wasn't that old man sitting in silence waiting to be noticed. I was gone, and she'd finally learned the difference between having money and having a man who earned it. While she searched for answers, I was already on a flight to somewhere she couldn't follow. The same morning she lost everything, I started over. By the time the sun rose over the city, I was already miles away. The highway stretched quiet, no traffic, no noise, just the hum of the tires and the feeling of freedom I hadn't felt in decades. The 2 armored cases sat in the trunk, filled with my lifetime of work. $3.6 million in cash, neatly packed, no strings attached. I didn't look back once. I didn't check the rearview mirror. There was nothing left behind worth seeing. I had spent too many years surrounded by people who saw me as a wallet, not a father. Now, all that was left was peace and distance. I drove for 6 hours straight, stopping only for gas and coffee. Nobody looked twice at me. Just another old man traveling alone. I liked it that way. No expectations, no questions. When I reached the state border, I turned off my phone's location permanently and tossed it into a trash bin outside a rest stop. From that moment on, I didn't exist in their world anymore. No calls, no texts, no begging. Just silence. The kind of silence that says, "You had your chance." I had already planned everything. New name, new address, new life. Before leaving, my lawyer helped me set up offshore accounts, secure investments, and long-term storage for documents that tied to my identity. Everything was clean and legal. I didn't want to hide from the law. I wanted to disappear from people who abused love. They made me feel like I didn't matter. Now they'd learn what it feels like when I stop existing in their comfort. That first night, I checked into a small coastal motel near Florida. I paid in cash, no ID. The woman at the counter gave me a key and didn't ask questions. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the ocean through the window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel like a burden. The air smelled like salt and freedom. I ate dinner alone, smiled to myself, and slept without waiting for anyone's voice to tell me what I could or couldn't do. The next morning, I went to the airport. I had already bought a one-way ticket using my lawyer's assistant's account. Destination: Lisbon, Portugal, with a transfer to Naples, Italy. I chose Italy because my wife always wanted to see it before she passed. She used to talk about the coast, the warm light, the sound of church bells at sunset. I never made that trip with her, but I was going to make it now. Not as a man escaping punishment, but as a man reclaiming his dignity. When the plane took off, I closed my eyes. I didn't think about my daughter. I didn't think about her husband. I didn't even think about the house. I thought about the young version of me who once believed that love and loyalty always came together. He was wrong, but he wasn't a fool. He was just too hopeful. I wasn't angry at him anymore. I was proud I finally learned. By the time I landed in Naples, I was officially gone from everything they knew. The lawyer finalized the closure of all U.S. assets. The accounts were moved, the papers were sealed, and the last traces of my name were erased from public record. To them, I was gone. Maybe dead, maybe missing. They'd never know for sure. And that uncertainty was the only punishment I ever needed to give them. I rented a small apartment overlooking the water. The first thing I bought was a simple chair for the balcony. I sat there watching the waves crash against the rocks, hearing the sound of life instead of noise. Nobody called me useless there. Nobody looked at me like a problem. I was just a man, quiet, alive, and free. It didn't take revenge to make me feel strong again. It took walking away with everything they didn't value. The money wasn't the victory. The silence was. The distance was. The peace was. I had vanished from their lives completely, and I wasn't coming back. The news must have spread fast back home. I imagine the first call went to the bank, then the lawyer, then the police. They'd try to report me missing, but there was nothing criminal to report. Everything I did was mine to do. Every paper signed, every dollar withdrawn, every transaction traced back legally to my name. There would be no investigation, no rescue mission, no answers, just confusion. My daughter would probably tell her friends I ran off, that I lost my mind, that old age made me crazy. Maybe that made her feel better than the truth, that I was finally free from her. For weeks, she would search for me. She'd check hospitals, motels, even call distant relatives. Every door would close. Nobody would know a thing. My lawyer was under strict instruction to stay silent. He would only confirm one fact, that I had sold the house, moved the assets, and left by choice. That single line would destroy her completely. She'd realize the same man she mocked for being useless had outsmarted her and taken away everything she assumed would one day be hers. There would be no inheritance, no safety net, no future built on my name. She would go from laughter to panic to silence. The neighbors would start whispering. People always talk when money disappears. They'd say things like, "He was such a good man," or, "I can't believe she treated him like that." For the first time, she'd hear her own reputation crumble the way she made mine crumble in private. Friends would stop visiting. Invitations would stop coming. The pity she once gave me would return to her, only this time from everyone else. Her husband would leave first. Men like him always do when the money runs dry. He'd take whatever he could sell, maybe the car, maybe the jewelry I once paid for. He'd blame her, say she ruined everything, and walk out the door. She'd sit alone in that empty house, calling banks, pleading with creditors, wondering how it all vanished so fast. Every number she dialed would lead to the same dead end. Closed account. No access. The house itself would feel colder. The laughter that once filled it would be replaced by echoes of anger. She'd walk through those halls and see everything I built stripped bare. No warmth, no security, no comfort, just walls and regret. Maybe she'd sit in the same chair where I used to sit quietly, wondering how she could fix something she broke with one careless sentence. But some things can't be fixed. Once respect is gone, it never returns. Back in Italy, my life had settled into something simple. I didn't need much. A small kitchen, a clean bed, and a balcony with a view of the sea. Every morning, I'd have espresso and fresh bread from the market. The locals didn't know who I was or what I'd done. To them, I was just another retired man enjoying his days near the coast. And that's exactly who I wanted to be. Nobody called me old. Nobody called me useless. They just called me sir. That was enough. Sometimes I'd sit there and wonder if she ever understood why I left. Not because I hated her, but because she stopped seeing me as a person. She forgot that fathers aren't replaceable. That comfort doesn't grow on trees. It's built on years of sacrifice. Maybe one day she'll understand. Maybe not. But either way, she'll live with the memory of the morning she woke up and realized everything she laughed at was gone. She lost her wealth that day. I found my peace. She lost her comfort. I found my purpose. She lost the father she disrespected. I found the man I used to be. I didn't leave her for revenge. I left her to remind her of something simple. When you stop valuing people, they stop staying. It's been a year since I left. I wake up every morning to the sound of waves hitting the rocks and church bells echoing across the town. I live in a small apartment by the sea. The walls are plain, the air smells like salt, and the sun hits my window just right at dawn. I don't have much here, but I don't need much. I have food, peace, and freedom. 3 things that money can't buy once you give them away to the wrong people. I used to think home meant being around family. Now I know home is anywhere you can breathe without being disrespected. Sometimes I walk along the pier and watch the fishermen come in with their nets. They don't know who I am or where I came from, and that's the best part. Nobody here sees an old man who's useless. They see a man who smiles, pays in cash, and minds his own business. I talk to a few locals. I help the baker lift boxes when he needs it. I sit with another retired man at the cafe every afternoon, and we don't talk much. We just sit there watching the sea. It's enough. Silence feels good when it's your own. I haven't spoken to my daughter since the day I left. I heard through a lawyer's letter that she moved to a small apartment after the bank repossessed the house. Her husband left. Her friends drifted away. She tried calling my old number for months, but there's no phone to answer anymore. Maybe one day she'll understand what really happened. Maybe she'll look back and realize that the man she laughed at didn't just walk away. He took with him everything that made her life easy. Not to hurt her, but to show her what she lost when she stopped caring. I don't feel proud of what I did. I feel settled. There's a difference. Revenge feeds on anger, but peace grows from acceptance. I accepted that she changed. I accepted that my time in her life was over. I stopped trying to fix people who didn't see the damage they caused. Sometimes, walking away is the only thing left to do. At night, I sit on the balcony with a cup of tea and watch the lights on the water. I think about my wife. I wish she could see this place. She would have loved it. I imagine her sitting next to me, smiling, telling me I did the right thing. I didn't leave our daughter because of hate. I left because love shouldn't feel like humiliation. I keep a small box by my bed. Inside it are a few old photographs. Me holding my daughter when she was a baby, her graduation picture, our first family trip. I don't look at them often, but sometimes I do. Not to feel sad, but to remember that I once gave everything I had to someone who needed it. And even if she forgot, I didn't. Love like that doesn't disappear. It just goes quiet. My days are simple now. I cook, I rest, I walk, and I write in a small notebook. I've learned to enjoy being invisible. No noise, no arguments, no guilt. Just life. Real, quiet life. I earned it. People spend their whole lives chasing comfort. I found mine the moment I stopped chasing anyone. My daughter once said I was useless. Maybe I was, but only to people who measured value in money, not in sacrifice. She lost everything that day. I found everything I had been missing. I didn't die in that house like they expected. I didn't fade away quietly. I lived again. I built a second life with the same hands they said were too old to matter. And every time the ocean breeze hits my face, I know I made the right choice. She said I was useless. I sold the house, took the money, and proved her wrong. In this new life, I'm not old. I'm free.